Mercedes is not fighting Ferrari. Mercedes is not fighting McLaren. Mercedes may be fighting itself, and the leaked evidence before Monaco has exposed something far more dangerous than a simple teammate clash. George Russell walked away from Canada sounding like a driver who no longer believes the championship is in his hands. Kimi Antonelli left Canada with the points, the momentum, and the one thing Russell was supposed to own this season: control. But here is the part nobody inside Mercedes wants to say out loud. When a driver with nothing to lose meets a championship leader on the streets of Monaco, one corner can destroy an entire season. The radios have already exploded. The internal meeting has already been exposed. The gap is already 43 points. And now the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile has seen enough evidence to understand this is not just racing. This is a power struggle inside the fastest team on the grid. And the real question is not whether Russell will obey Mercedes. The real question is what happens if he decides he does not have to. Subscribe to the channel. Mercedes did not arrive at this crisis overnight. That is what makes it so dangerous. Because from the outside, Canada looked like the moment everything exploded. The radio anger. The contact. The accusation. Russell's car dying while he was leading. Antonelli walking away with another victory, another trophy, and an even stronger grip on the championship. But inside Mercedes, the pressure had been building since the very first race. Australia was supposed to prove that everything was under control. Russell won. Antonelli finished second. The team had the perfect result, the kind of result every championship operation dreams about. 2 silver cars at the front. No drama. No wasted points. No public tension. It looked like the clean beginning of a Mercedes era built around George Russell. And that mattered, because Russell was not meant to be just another driver in this story. He was supposed to be the leader. After years of waiting, after carrying the team through difficult seasons, after proving he could handle the pressure of replacing legends, Russell entered this campaign expecting one thing above everything else: control. Control of the garage. Control of the championship fight. Control of the narrative. He was the experienced driver. He was the British star. He was the man who had already earned his place inside Mercedes. And with the fastest car on the grid, this was meant to be the year everything finally aligned. But one weekend into the season, Mercedes saw something it could not ignore. Antonelli was not driving like a rookie who needed time. He was driving like a threat. The scoreboard still favored Russell after Australia, but the deeper numbers told a more uncomfortable story. In one of the most technical parts of Albert Park, Antonelli was already faster. Not by a massive amount. Not enough to create a headline by itself. But enough for the engineers to notice. And in Formula One, when engineers notice something, it rarely disappears. That was the first crack. Not a crash. Not a shouting match. Not a dramatic team order. Just data. Cold, quiet data. The kind of data that does not care who was promised what. The kind of data that does not care who is older, who has waited longer, or who was expected to become the face of the team. It only asks one question. Who is faster? At first, Mercedes could contain it. Russell had won the race. Antonelli had done his job. The team could smile for the cameras and call it harmony. But harmony in Formula One is fragile. Because the moment the younger driver starts matching the leader, the garage changes. Every debrief feels sharper. Every comparison becomes heavier. Every lap time begins to sound like a warning. Then China arrived, and the warning became real. Russell took pole position. For a few hours, it looked like the natural order had returned. The veteran had answered. The team leader had reminded everyone why Mercedes trusted him. But Sunday did not belong to him. Antonelli's strategy worked perfectly. He undercut Russell, moved ahead, and then did something even more important. He stayed there. That is the detail that matters. A rookie can get lucky. A rookie can benefit from timing. A rookie can stumble into a good result when a race falls apart around him. But Antonelli did not just inherit the lead. He defended the meaning of it. He turned opportunity into victory. And when Russell needed to respond, he could not take control back. That changed the emotional balance inside Mercedes. Because Russell had not simply lost a race. He had lost a race to the driver who was supposed to be learning from him. And behind that defeat was another uncomfortable detail. Russell had suffered a problem in qualifying at the worst possible moment, when he was trying to complete another fast lap. Mercedes investigated it, but the immediate origin was not clearly found. That kind of moment leaves a mark. Not because it proves anything sinister. It does not. But because in a title fight, timing becomes emotional. When trouble hits the same driver at the exact moment he needs perfection, frustration starts to build its own logic. A driver begins to wonder whether he is fighting another car, another garage, or just a season that has quietly turned against him. After China, Antonelli led the championship. And suddenly, the rookie was no longer the future. He was the present. Then came Japan. Suzuka should have been Russell's chance to strike back. He had pace. He had confidence. He looked ready to fight for the win. But once again, the race slipped away in a way that felt almost cruel. The safety car came at the perfect moment for Antonelli, and the worst possible moment for Russell. One driver gained. The other lost the advantage he had been building. On paper, it was racing. Emotionally, it was another wound. Because this was not one bad weekend anymore. It was a pattern. Every time Russell looked ready to pull the season back toward himself, something moved the other way. Antonelli won again. Russell was left explaining another lost opportunity. And that is when the championship stopped feeling like a simple battle of speed. It started feeling like a psychological trap. Because the harder Russell pushed, the more the season seemed to reward Antonelli. And the more Antonelli won, the harder it became for Mercedes to keep pretending the hierarchy was still what they had imagined before the first race. Then Miami made the situation impossible to dismiss. This was the weekend when the internal question became sharper. Was Antonelli simply driving better? Or was the car beginning to expose something deeper? The answer was uncomfortable, because it may have been both. Antonelli won again, while Russell finished fourth. But the most important story was not the trophy. It was the way the W17 seemed to respond to each driver. Antonelli appeared able to manage the rear tires with more control. He could keep them alive in the moments when the car demanded precision. He could stay inside the window, lap after lap, without burning away the grip he needed later. Russell, on the other hand, was fighting the balance. And when a driver does not trust the balance, everything becomes harder. The braking feels later than it should. The steering feels less certain. The rear of the car feels like it could step away at the wrong moment. And once that doubt enters the hands of a Formula One driver, the lap time begins to bleed away. Russell said the car was not giving him what he needed. That sentence mattered. Because it was not just about performance. It was about identity. This was supposed to be his car. His season. His championship opportunity. But now the machine appeared to suit Antonelli more naturally, and Mercedes had to face an issue no team likes to admit. Sometimes, the fastest car does not belong equally to both drivers. Sometimes, it chooses. Not deliberately. Not politically. Not through conspiracy. But through driving style, tire behavior, setup direction, and confidence. And if the car chooses one driver more than the other, the team's internal politics begin to change, whether anyone admits it or not. That is where Russell's frustration became dangerous. Because he was not being beaten by an outside rival. He was being beaten by a teammate with the same badge on his chest, the same car beneath him, and the same team listening to every word. And by the time Mercedes reached Canada, the conflict was no longer hidden inside lap charts and debrief rooms. It was ready to detonate. Before the weekend even began, Russell admitted something that revealed the emotional truth of his season. He said he expected to be the main protagonist, and he had not been. That was not just honesty. That was a confession. A confession that the role he believed was his had been taken away in real time. Antonelli, meanwhile, answered like a driver who already understood his power. He was the championship leader, and that said everything about the current situation. Those two statements were not just words. They were positions. Russell sounded like a man trying to explain why the story had changed. Antonelli sounded like a man who believed the story had already changed. And when two drivers enter a race weekend with that much tension already loaded into the garage, it does not take much to turn pressure into fire. Canada did exactly that. Canada was not the beginning of the Mercedes crisis. Canada was the moment the crisis stopped hiding. And that is why what happened there matters so much before Monaco. Because every team can survive a hard race. Every driver can survive a bad radio message. Every championship fight can survive one uncomfortable weekend. But Canada was not one thing. It was everything at once. It was the contact. It was the radio. It was the internal meeting being dragged into public. It was Russell losing a race he thought he could win. It was Antonelli gaining even more control. And it was Mercedes suddenly realizing that the rivalry inside its own garage had become too loud for the team to manage quietly. The first warning came before the main race even started. In the sprint, Russell and Antonelli reached the first corner with exactly the kind of tension Mercedes feared. Two drivers, same team, same car, same championship, neither one willing to behave like the supporting character. Russell defended hard. Antonelli felt he had been forced out. And in that moment, the entire season compressed into one corner. Because Antonelli was not reacting like a driver angry at a random rival. He was reacting like a driver who believed his own teammate had crossed a line. His radio message was sharp, emotional, and impossible to ignore. He said Russell had closed him off. He said he had been pushed wide. He wanted a penalty. He said it could not be tolerated. That phrase matters. Could not be tolerated. Because that is not just a complaint about space on the track. That is a driver asking for the team, the stewards, or the system to define what Russell is allowed to do. And then came the line that exposed the real wound. He said Russell was his teammate. That was the moment the battle changed. Because when a driver says that, he is not only talking about the corner. He is talking about expectation. He is talking about trust. He is talking about the invisible rules that are supposed to exist between two cars in the same colors. You can race hard, but not like that. You can defend, but not at any cost. You can fight, but do not risk both cars. That is what Antonelli's anger was really pointing toward. And Mercedes knew it immediately. His engineer told him the move was not being investigated and told him to stay focused. That was the safe response. Calm the driver. Protect the race. Stop the emotion from spreading. But the emotion had already spread. Toto Wolff stepped in and told Antonelli to focus on driving, not on complaining over the radio. That intervention was important. Because team principals do not usually enter radio conversations unless the moment is becoming bigger than normal race management. Wolff was not just calming a driver. He was trying to stop the world from hearing the full sound of Mercedes losing control. But it was too late. The message had already landed. And then Mercedes issued a warning to both drivers, telling them they needed both cars to compete without taking more risks. That was the clearest sign yet. The team was no longer simply managing strategy. It was managing behavior. And managing behavior is what teams do when trust starts to break. After the sprint, the tension followed them into the press room. Russell sat beside Antonelli, and the atmosphere said what neither driver wanted to fully say. The words were controlled. The body language was not. Russell defended himself by pointing out that the stewards had not investigated the move. To him, that proved enough. But Antonelli answered with a sentence that cut through the polite language. He said it looked like he had not understood the meeting. That was the real leak. Not a document. Not a secret recording. A sentence. Because suddenly, the public knew there had been a meeting. A private Mercedes meeting. A discussion before Canada about how the two drivers were expected to race each other. A line drawn inside the team before the sprint even happened. And now Antonelli was implying that Russell had failed to follow the spirit of it. That changed everything. Because if Mercedes had already needed an internal meeting before Canada, then Canada was not an isolated explosion. It was a continuation. It meant the team had seen the pressure coming. It meant Wolff had already tried to contain it. It meant the garage knew this rivalry was becoming unstable before the fans fully understood it. That is the kind of evidence that matters before Monaco. Because Monaco is not a place where drivers can learn restraint after the mistake. Monaco demands restraint before the mistake. And Canada proved restraint was already under pressure. Then came Sunday. And Sunday turned the tension into something much bigger. Russell and Antonelli did not simply run near each other. They fought for control of the race. The lead changed 4 times between them, and every change carried more weight than the last. For Mercedes, this should have been a dream. 2 W17 cars fighting at the front. The fastest team on the grid showing its strength. A championship campaign being controlled from the front. But instead, it felt like danger. Because when teammates fight at the front, the team wins only if both drivers understand the invisible limit. And Canada made that limit look fragile. Antonelli, under pressure, cut the chicane to stay ahead. Mercedes told him to give the position back. On the surface, that was fairness. The team acted correctly. The position was returned. The race continued. But underneath, that moment added another layer. Because now both drivers had reason to feel watched, judged, and managed. Russell could feel that Antonelli had gone too far. Antonelli could feel that every move he made was being scrutinized. Mercedes could feel that every decision would be interpreted as proof of favoritism or proof of weakness.